Checking your Classic 107 weather. Current temperature is minus 18 degrees in the city of Winnipeg, but it is sunny out. Hey, that's a good thing, isn't it? It's sunny, and we're looking for a high of minus 9. Tonight, increasing cloudiness and a little bit of snow overnight with a low of minus 14. But things are looking up for the weekend. Minus 1 and then even 10 degrees, if we're to believe it, on Sunday. Minus 18 degrees in the city of Winnipeg. We're going to warm things up right now because happening starting yesterday and running all the way till March 5th, the Optimist Band Festival. It's their 41st anniversary. The jazz bands. We had the concert bands in last week. The jazz bands are taking over again at the North Kildonan Mennonite Brethren Church, running all the way through the weekend. And so as we've been doing last week and this week, we're featuring some of the performers and some of the people involved in the festival. So in the studio this morning with me, I have Gordon Foote and Kathy Byrne. Kathy Byrne is the jazz band director at Sturgeon Heights, used to be Silver Heights. We'll call it Sturgeon Heights right now. And I've also got Gordon Foote, who's the professor of jazz studies at U of T. He's also the director of the University of Toronto Jazz Orchestra. That's a big part of what he does there. He's got a long resume here. I could read it all for you, but why don't we just chat with him instead, and he can tell us a little bit about himself. He's spent some time in Winnipeg. Good morning, Gordon, and good morning, Kathy.
Good morning.
We'll chat with Kathy in a few minutes, but Gordon, you've been involved in band for a couple of years, I guess you could say. Yeah, just a couple of years. Why don't you tell us a bit about your background and your experience with different bands?
All right. Well, I've always been a prairie boy. I grew up in Regina with the Lions Band, Bob Mossing and the people there, and then my dad was with CP Rail, so he was transferred to Winnipeg with CP Rail. And at that point, I went down to University of Minnesota, did an undergrad degree in teaching. And after that, I came to Winnipeg and started teaching. My first job here was teaching at Silver Heights and halftime at Lincoln, which was Lincoln Junior High at the time. And so that was my very first, real full-time teaching job. And that was, I think, probably the first year of the festival in Winnipeg. And John Balsillie sent me a photo yesterday from that festival. It's me at 21 years old with my first band. Yeah. That's a lot of water under the bridge there. And after that, I went back to Minnesota. Did a Minnesota. Geez, I even say it like a Minnesotan. Went to Minnesota, did a master's degree. Then I went down to North Texas. Great jazz program down there. And in the middle of that program, Don Timmerman, who was co-teaching, we were both teaching at Silver Heights at the time, sent me a notice that St. FX University out in Antigonish was starting a jazz program, which would be the first university jazz program in the country. So I applied for it and actually got the gig. So I moved from Denton, Texas to Antigonish, Nova Scotia. And we got that program up and running. I was there for 6 years. And then moved to McGill. And I was at McGill for 26 years with that jazz program and directing the McGill Jazz Orchestra and doing all kinds of things there. We traveled to Mexico, France, Switzerland, Ireland, England, all over the U.S., all over Canada, made many, many recordings and lots of guests and that. And then for the past 4 years now, I've been at University of Toronto, where Don McLean, who was the dean at McGill, is now in a second term as dean at the University of Toronto Faculty of Music.
So he brought you over.
So he brought me over as it was part of his hiring originally that he would have some opportunity hires. And one of the areas he wanted to boost was jazz. So we did that. We worked as an administrative team at McGill and are doing the same thing now at U of T. So it's a good combination, and we're really starting to make things happen in the well, the music program is a very strong music program there, but kind of boost up the jazz program as well. We've gone from 1 full-time faculty member at U of T to 5 full-time. So what goes along with that, of course, is more numbers and boosted quality and more course offerings and more interest and more presence and travel and fundraising and, all those kinds of things. And on the side, I do these kinds of things where I go out to lots of regional festivals and, in fact, the national. I've done judged the Music Fest Canada. I mean, this is a regional of the Music Fest Canada system. So I've done that one. I think the first time I did the national was actually 1987, so I've been doing that for a while as well.
Well, I want to talk a bit more about band festivals, but I'm just kind of curious about, do you remember back in the day when you were just starting to perform? First of all, what's your instrument? And second of all, were there these kind of festivals when you were growing up?
My first instrument was clarinet. And then since then I've added saxophone. I'm basically a saxophone player now, but you don't really drop the others, especially if you're a woodwind player. You got to add flute and clarinet and saxophone. So I've done that. And yes, when I was a kid, I started playing clarinet at 7, and there were these kinds of festivals then, and the big one was always the Kinsman Festival in Moose Jaw. That was a massive festival, and bands from all over Saskatchewan would come to that, and there'd be this long parade and solo competition and jazz band competition and concert band competitions and that. So no, there's a huge tradition in the country of band festivals, music festivals, and they continue today. And then of course the Music Fest Canada one has been going for many years and has been in Winnipeg as a national festival a few times. So it's still going. This year it's in Ottawa.
Now, you've been an adjudicator here. I think you mentioned off air to me at least a dozen times. As an adjudicator, I know this is important for our audience to know that there's no winners and there's no losers in this festival. It's not like there's a number one and there's someone who comes in last. That's not the way these festivals run. It's all about they're being I guess they're being judged on so many different qualities. What are the kind of things you look for as an adjudicator?
Well, first of all, there are really 3 types of festivals. The festival where you actually get 96.3% out of 100, and there's a winner, and then everybody else is a loser, kind of thing. Then there's the other kind, the second kind, which is where you play to a standard, and there's a gold, silver, and bronze standard, and so everybody in that class could get a gold, or nobody could get a gold, depending on the class. And then there's the third kind, which there is no rating whatsoever. And everybody is there just specifically for music and education and the experience and that kind of thing. The Music Fest Canada one is the middle, where you play to a standard. There's another festival out in Banff called the Rocky Mountain Festival, where there is no rating at all. No ratings are given. And so there's a range there. I actually prefer the third kind, but the second kind is also as good, I think. I don't like the kind where there's one winner and, that kind of thing. But when I'm listening to ensembles, I call it the Stamp Out Jazz Ignorance Tour, SOJI. And I've been doing it for many years. And my main goal in doing these things is to educate people in the art form. And that means things like the sound, the styles, the articulations, the phrasing, the types of music, the improvisation, sectional playing, rhythm sections, the drummer, what does he or she have to do? What is it like to be a lead trumpet player? What is it like to be in a saxophone section? What do you listen for? Things like pitch, sound, ensemble playing, those kinds of things. And the bands that really sound good are able to put all of those elements, and there are probably 100 elements altogether that have to be happening for an ensemble to sound really good. And so those are the kinds of things that I listen for. And then when I hear something, I try to give as quick and clear an explanation as to how to fix that, how to go about addressing the issue. And very often it happens quite quickly, where you'll just say one thing, give a sort of an image of some sort, a visual of some sort, have them play it again, and very often there's a big difference. I like to think that if you give them the right amount of information and the right way of saying it and the right visual, that within about 5 minutes you can have an ensemble sounding 10, 15, 20, 25% better just because of those kinds of instructions. So that's my goal.
So just quickly before I turn the microphone to Kathy, in all your years of adjudicating, have you ever been floored by one particular band where they just nailed it right off the top?
Oh, it happens. Yeah, it does happen. And often it is a group that, it's always a group that has the leader who really knows what's happening, but not only what's happening, but has the work ethic and the passion to make it happen. Because if you don't have all of those things together, it's really not going to happen.
Well, let's bring in Kathy then and see. Thank you for coming in, Kathy.
Oh,
I appreciate it. This is Kathy Byrne. I've been chatting with Gordon Foote He is in town to adjudicate the Optimist International Band Festival, and he's been doing it for a long time. We'll just bring you a bit closer to the mic just so we can hear you there. And Kathy Byrne is the jazz band director at Sturgeon Heights. So after hearing that, Kathy, what is your impression in terms, do you feel nervous now? I know you've been doing this for a while. You used to play in jazz bands as well. In fact, you played at Sturgeon Heights, or when it was the old Silver Heights. Tell us a bit about your background. You're a teacher now, but what about before that?
Yeah, actually, I didn't play at Silver Heights. I taught at Silver Heights. You taught at Silver Heights.
Okay, excuse me.
I went to Fort Richmond Collegiate,
yes, that's
and
right, Fort Richmond.
I'm a graduate of Fort Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
But as a director, I think it's awesome not only for me but also for my students to to be able to listen to what the adjudicator has to say and bring us to the next level of learning. And sometimes it's things that the adjudicator says that I've said myself, and when they're phrased in a different way or there's a different imagery associated with them, it increases the depth of the learning in the student. And sometimes I'm introduced to concepts that I really didn't know a lot about, and it's awesome for professional development for myself to be exposed to that, and it's a great goal for the students. There's something a little bit different about preparing for a festival where you've got prescribed literature that you're working on, as opposed to just a concert where basically most of the audience is uneducated. It's really nice to come into an opportunity where the person who is listening to you and giving you feedback really is the most educated person in the room.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of things do you tell your students to prepare for a festival like this? I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, and I imagine there's a lot of nervous energy going into it. What kind of things do you tell them to sort of calm them before they get on stage when they're faced with, as you say, playing for some of these very well-educated and knowledgeable jazz people?
Well, I think it starts way before preparing for a particular festival, because I think preparing for any performance, there's kind of a strategy. And I think one of the best things that you can do is, like, jazz is a language into itself, and it requires a lot of listening. It's a very different language than classical music or rock music or any other genre. And just like you would never try and learn French by reading a textbook and never hearing it spoken, it's really important to listen to jazz artists so that you get an idea of inflection and emphasis and the syncopation and accent and all of those things, as well as the improvisational element to it. And
you have to immerse yourself in the culture.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one of the most important things that they can start to do right from the very beginning. When they first make a noise on their instrument, they should also be listening. And then in terms of preparing for performance, I think it's really important to not speed the process up. And I think it's important for them to work on things slowly and to also gain an understanding of the music literacy piece that goes with it. If they're learning everything by ear, they're not actually developing their reading skills and their ability to interpret the symbols on the page and become an independent musician themselves. They're just relying on somebody else to feed them the information. So I like to try and be pretty strategic about teaching the actual music literacy elements. And then in terms of their own individual practice, just playing things slowly and meticulously and thinking about all of the things that bring music alive and off the page, and trying to incorporate the right accent and the right articulation, that kind of thing, I think is really important. Mm-hmm. And then once they put the hard work in themselves, bringing the group together, I always tell them that their job is to learn their own individual part outside of the rehearsal. And the rehearsal is for listening to each other and trying to bring the whole group together and understanding everybody else's part in relation to their own role. So I think if they do those things, they're going to be in pretty good condition by the time it gets to be the performance. And if I'm in the warm-up room with them, it's all about, you've done the hard work. Whatever is going to happen today is going to happen, and just enjoy making music and bringing something to the audience that is like a gift. They've put in all the hard work. Now it's time to be inspired by the beauty of the art.
Yeah, I think ultimately there has to be a passion there, because, I mean, on top of all this stuff you just said, I mean, they're regular school students as well at the same time, and they've got to keep up their studies. They've got to do all this stuff. So obviously there has to be a real passion there. And I think to get to this level, even though it's, say a high school band, to get to this level, there has to be a lot of work and a lot of passion involved, because a lot of the students may or may not go on to further their studies. But even to see them get to this level, there's obviously that level of passion. And as a teacher and as an adjudicator, to spend 40 some odd years doing this kind of thing, and, kudos to you both, because it's a lot of hard work and a lot of passion. So again, we just sort of touched on a few things, but thank you for coming in this morning. Gordon and Kathy, and they're part of the Optimist Band Festival. Kathy will be sticking around town. She teaches at Sturgeon Heights. Gordon will be heading back to Toronto, where he teaches, and it's open to the public. This thing is open to the public. It started yesterday and runs till March 5th at North Kildonan Mennonite Brethren Church. Just go on to the Manitoba Band Association website and find out information about it there. So again, thank you for coming in this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome back to Winnipeg, and glad to have you in the studio.
Thanks.